welcome back to Of Stone and Clay. This is episode 104 with Jordan Moyes. Thanks for being here, brother.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
If you're newer to the pod, Jordan joined us on episode 65, and we were just talking about this in our old setup, which was my apartment with a desk and 2 mics and my iPhone. And so
that's right. They were just phone. That's camera.
yeah. And I don't even know if I ever got the footage up because I think like my battery died or something.
Sure. Yeah.
It was a great scenario. So I always wanted to have you back on when we had a better setup.
I appreciate it.
And so yeah, dude, tell me a little bit about your last. I looked at it. It was about a year ago.
Yeah.
That we chatted.
Yeah.
So you've been on the road a lot. You've been touring with who? With the National Parks.
I'm wearing a hat.
Yeah. Who else was on the tour?
That was just us for that for the leg that I was on in the spring. I was just the one and only solo opener, and so I went out on the road previously with them, and my buddy Kason Renshaw came, who's another local artist here out of Utah, and played guitar. But for this one, it was more convenient to just have me go solo and ride with the band.
Yeah. Was that your first time like touring?
Yeah, so I went on 2 legs of it. I went a leg back in the fall, which I think I had been on before last time I saw you. But then we went back out for a longer stint for like 2.5 weeks, in early spring, which was super great. Just like that position of an opening slot on a tour is just, there's something about it that is rewarding and feels special to just play for a new audience every night that doesn't know who you are.
Right.
That could be seen as a lot of different ways, but I think for me at least, like it was, I was just grateful for the opportunity to play for new listeners, but in new cities that I hadn't played in before, or even been in before.
Probably bigger venues than
bigger venues than I would be able to fill, on my own.
Sure.
So, super great. They're just the national parks. They're the best, and they represent Utah super well. And they're the best.
Did you have a relationship with them beforehand, or how did you get set up?
A little bit here and there. Like I opened a couple of one-off shows when they'd come back here to Utah and play. Like they played a secret show at the Velour that they announced like the day before, like a 2-night thing that sold out really fast, which was cool because they play much bigger venues than that nowadays. And so they had asked me to open for that. Which is super great and it was funny. I was talking to a couple people about this because Garen Brett, who I'm sure that he's been on here, a mutual friend, another really brilliant artist. I was on the phone with him this one night, and we were both talking about shows that we would love to open and like fans that we'd love to play for, and we made different kind of tiers of goals, and we were like, who would be like a reasonable kind of locally based act that you'd love to play with and open for? And I was like, man, I'd love to open a national park show because I just love, like, they have like a really great loyal fan base that I'd been to a couple shows of theirs prior, and it was always amazing, like the support that they would show for the support artist, for the opening artist. You don't even see that with certain fan bases. Like they're not as mindful of that.
Well, a lot of times I'll go to a show and I'll be like, I don't know who's opening, so I'm going to come later.
Sure. Yeah, you're like, I don't know who this is.
It's not even that I don't like them. I just am like, I'd rather,
Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways to look at it, and especially like if you have other plans. I don't know. A headline, a full show these days is such a long process. Like by the time doors open and the end of the headline set, like it can be like 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours, which is wild, and that's a lot to ask of an audience. But for whatever reason, the national parks have always been super supportive of that opening slot, and I'd seen that as an audience member. But anyway, I was having that conversation with Garen. I remember we had made like reasonable, achievable goals, and then like crazier, bigger ones for down the line. But the national parks was like my main one. I think his was the Strike. Talked about the Strike, which I know he has a relationship with them. But anyway, that night I get home and I'm at my apartment in Orem, and I get a text, or it was a DM from the national parks saying, "Hey, we're playing this show, this like surprise show next month. We'd love to have you open it." And it was the most mind blowing thing, because I didn't really have like we had followed each other on Instagram and whatnot, and I'm sure I'd seen them at shows and whatnot, but I didn't have a relationship with them.
Right.
And it was kind of this crazy, like full circle. And I ended up telling Brady and the whole band about that, years later, of how crazy it was that like, I was just talking about this. Like that'd be a huge goal of mine. So to go from that one show to then have them bring me on the road and get to tour with them has been a huge blessing.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Are you big into, I don't know, manifesting or goal setting? What's kind of your philosophy on
I don't know if I am. It's like maybe I am a little bit. I don't know. It is one of those things that was crazy in the moment. Like, this is wild that I was just randomly talking about this, because I hadn't even really thought about it much prior to that conversation I had. But maybe there's something to it. I don't know. I think we can be inspired to want certain things, like the same way that our life experiences can just lead us towards different desires and goals and things like that. And so it was definitely comforting to just feel like I don't know. I feel like there's always, as you progress in a career in music, like your wins start to look differently.
Yeah.
And I think every artist at every stage has a different version of that. But for me at that time, like it was a big win.
Yeah.
And I just remember it feeling like something that I definitely had reached for a while. So it was
that's
cool
really
to just feel that fulfilled.
What's as an opener, is it kind of like every night you're playing 3 or 4 songs, or what's kind of the?
It's usually a 30 to 40 minute set.
Okay.
So how many songs you can fit into that.
So being a solo artist, do you are you communicating a lot with them about, hey, I want to play these songs, what do you guys think? Or is it very much just like, hey, go do your thing?
It's pretty much do your thing. I don't know if there's really any scenarios with artists where, and unfortunately in the industry there are a lot of headliners that have openers on the road with them, and there's not a lot of communication between them even when they're on that tour. Like I don't think sometimes the opener and the support act that gets picked for that tour can sometimes just come down to like someone mutual and within management or like a label or things like that. There doesn't necessarily need to be a relationship between the headliner. And so sometimes I think for a lot of people it can just feel like a business thing of just you go do your thing and then we're gonna go do our thing, and usually you have separate green rooms and separate dressing rooms and sound check at different times and things like that, and so sometimes you don't even really see that those paths cross. You just show up at the next venue the next day and they're there. But so I was grateful to have, as this like first kind of big legitimate tour, to be a band that wasn't like that, but just was super welcoming and
there's some camaraderie
there. And like the last leg that I went on with them, I rode in the van. Like we rode in the van together, piled in this van, and we were at the same hotels and everything every night. And so that was just a cool bonding moment to just have, for me to just learn so much from that experience, from someone, from a group that's been doing it for 10 plus years and been on the road so consistently, to see how they work in that environment and what has worked and what hasn't worked for them was such a learning opportunity for me. So but I for the most part, I think you're just kind of trusted to do your job and expected to do what you do and to, hopefully give their audience, like it's very much their audience. Sure. Like I had people come, listeners of mine that would come and I would meet afterwards over at the merch table and things like that. But that's a small percentage of the actual audience that's there to see the headliner, right? And so you do feel you do feel a little bit of an expectation to put on a good show, because they're not there to see you, but you want it to be memorable for them. So, but there was so much camaraderie in that environment that didn't need to happen. Yeah. Like I'm sure a lot of other tours aren't always that, especially at even higher levels. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, I went to, when I was like 16, I went to a Bone Thugs and Harmony concert.
Okay.
Okay.
Rad.
With
Cool.
my dad.
Okay.
Okay. And the funny thing is, I love them. I was a big,
Yeah.
into rap when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And so all I knew is they were playing a show. I'm going to see them. Little did I realize they were the opening band,
Mm.
and they were opening for Insane Clown Posse.
Okay.
And so,
Yeah.
so
ICP.
yeah, for ICP. So the audience was like 99% juggalos.
Sure.
You know, these that's what they call themselves. They
Okay,
call
yeah.
themselves juggalos.
Yeah.
And it's a very specific, interesting crowd.
Yeah.
And ICP, they like spray soda on their fans while they
Okay.
play. It's just a very weird
Yeah.
niche crowd.
Sure.
And yeah, the more I think about it, it's probably what you said. It's probably just like their labels,
Yeah.
you know, because
Yeah.
I'm like, these fan bases aren't really.
These aren't meshing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
But I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I was just like, I did not know these guys were friends.
Sure.
That's what I was thinking,
Totally.
you know.
They might not have been. So
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
You know.
Okay, dude, last time we talked, you had been married like 2 months, I think.
Yeah, it was pretty recent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me, now that you've been married like a year,
Yeah.
kind of what is maybe some things about marriage that you know now that you didn't, you just have a better grasp
Sure.
on or understanding of.
That's a great question. Yeah, my wife
And we
and
do
I,
have your sweet wife
yes, my wife is
in the
here.
studio.
She is
Yeah.
here, so
She's been heckling
checks
us, but
or facts will be checked. But yeah, we just celebrated our 1 year anniversary a couple weekends ago, which was great.
nice, yeah.
Man, that's a hard question. What is like I think just with any relationship, I think communication is key.
Yeah.
And understanding what you need to be communicated to you, but more so like what your partner needs to hear from you and
Yeah.
what she needs you to communicate to them in scenarios that you may not feel like you need to communicate or disclose what you're
Yeah.
feeling or whatever, you know.
Well, there's just so many more specific instances to communicate
Totally.
about as a
Yes.
married couple
Yeah.
versus dating where you're just kind of
Mhm.
happy to be together,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
You're
there
just,
feels more like more high stake conversations.
yeah, you're just your lives are entwined
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like you communicate similarly, or has there been a bit of a learning curve where like even if it's good communication, you communicate differently?
That's a good question. I think we have learned to communicate similarly in the sense that in an effort to be fair and like to treat the other person how we would want to be treated, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that can naturally happen in a marriage where you are thinking about what you need in that relationship, and so then I think naturally you're more mindful of how you can in return provide that same thing.
Yeah.
So that their needs are met in the same way that yours are.
Yeah.
But it's a learning process.
Yeah.
I think with my wife and we've talked about it a lot, but we had to learn that communication pretty early on, which I was really grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that we were very open and upfront about a lot of things, like very, very early on into our dating.
And part of that was because you, like I remember we talked about, you felt very early on like, oh, this is gonna be legit. Like, we're gonna be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this is my person.
Yeah.
Very much so. And so I think it was like.
It was easy to let your walls down early, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think it just felt like neither of us needed to beat around the bush. And so I felt like a lot of hard conversations were gotten out of the way earlier. And maybe not even because it was something we needed to talk about, but just so that we could learn how to resolve conflict, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Just preemptive stuff.
Yeah, I do think that there was a part of me that understood that the hardest things that we go through as a couple, like when we were dating, were not nearly going to be the hardest things that we would ever go through together.
Yeah.
Like I think, the stakes are very different at that point. The consequences aren't the same, I think. And so I do think a part of me understood that, like, I think we wanted to develop those skills early on, before we had kids and before we had other other trying scenarios that felt more significant. I think it's an important thing to learn early on, and I've shared that with other people that are in relationships and asking for advice and whatnot, that are thinking about getting married and whatnot, because I don't know, I think people talk about that like the honeymoon phase and things like that, and a lot of that can happen when you're first dating, and I think sometimes that can lead you to avoid conflict or avoid
because you just
the resolution of conflict because you maybe don't want to acknowledge that the conflict exists. Because in some way that doesn't align with like the giddiness that you feel and whatnot within the honeymoon phase. And so I think there is a lot of denial that can be exposed in that scenario. And so I think a lot of that also was just, I was in my late 20s and I was a much different person than I was in my early 20s when I started dating seriously. And so I do think there is something to be said about that of just having hard conversations, I think.
Yeah. It's funny. I know for myself, I've found myself early in relationships when I'm starting to get giddy and starting to just be like sort of obsessed with this person. Even if we align on almost everything, which is maybe part of the reason why I'm getting obsessed with this person, I still find myself thinking, okay, there's maybe this or this or this that they might disagree with or see differently. But I'm like, because I'm in this happy little giddy childlike stage, I don't even want to bring it up. Not because I think it'll be a fight, but almost like it'll maybe be a buzzkill.
Like I don't want to miss this.
Like, moment. It's just so sacred right now. Totally. I don't want to rock the boat. But I do think
that's so funny.
But I do think like that can become problematic if that continues.
Sure. I think it can just develop a pattern. For sure of you, like almost just a pattern of you not explaining your needs or making your needs known.
Right.
And that happens from both parties, that I think I don't know, and there's definitely like there's definitely a way to overdo what I'm saying and things like that. Like I think it's so funny because there is such a fine balance of explaining your needs, but then also understanding when you need to let things go and let things slide. Things that aren't significant. And so I think as like a responsible partner, that's your duty to decipher those things and understand what is worth being talked about and what isn't. In terms of being selfless or selfish. And so it's like, that's like a balance that everybody needs to find on their own.
Right.
Because, you have to be happy for the other person to be happy, and for you to be able to make that person happy, like you need to feel like your needs are being met too. But you could also nitpick every little thing and be miserable.
Right.
It's like no one will ever be able to read your mind. And so there's a balance there for sure.
I was going back listening to our old episode, and often when I do that, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have like asked more about this or dug into this, because sometimes we just go off on tangents or whatever. But part of the reason it made me think of this is my last episode I did with Kylie Shields. She's a therapist, and we were talking a lot about how when you talk about grief, most people just think about death, but you also grieve like many things at once.
Totally.
Like sometimes, we were talking about when your mom passed away, and you don't just grieve her death, you grieve, not having these experiences anymore. You grieve, not seeing her at holidays. You grieve all these very specific things. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about sort of that grief you felt about her never meeting your wife. Because I remember, it's funny, not even really that comparable, but I remember when my grandma passed away, one of the first things that really hit me hard was like, oh, she's never going to meet my wife. And I mean, I haven't met my wife either, but
I was this exact same way. It was honestly probably the very first thing I thought about when my mom died. It was like my journey was not to the point yet where she was, she wasn't allowed to do that yet because I hadn't met my person for them to meet first.
And she died young enough that you never really considered that.
No. No, totally. I was 24.
Yeah.
And I was dating, but it was like in no way was I in any sort of rush to meet the person that I was going to marry. And that's certainly not something that I thought about anytime soon, that it was like, oh, this needs to happen so that my parents can see that.
Yeah.
My mom was in her late 60s when she died. And so, yeah, it was obviously sooner than I wanted it to be. But yeah, it's funny you say that, because it genuinely was like the very first thing I thought about. And it was something that a lot of my family had thought about as well. It's because I come from such a large family. I'm the youngest of 9 kids.
Yeah.
My 8 older siblings were all married at the time and had their person in their own families.
Right.
And I was always just kind of the last link to complete that.
Right.
Which I know was something that my parents were always so proud of like my other siblings' families and whatnot. And I remember a lot of my siblings expressing that to me, of just being like, this wasn't supposed to happen yet because our family wasn't complete yet.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it was such an important thing that my parents took so much pride in, was just the strength of our family and my siblings and the families of their own that they had started.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I can't remember what I had said previously about the topic, because you mourn so many other aspects of. I think about it all the time, of like when I lost my mom, I kind of lost my childhood as well, because anything nostalgic, for like, I'm better with it now, but especially at the time, it was just like inconceivable to find any kind of joy in anything nostalgic, because it would just remind me of this time that I knew I would never get back. And so it was kind of always this wrestle of learning how to think about those moments with a little bit more joy, like
looking at old pictures and
looking
stuff.
at old pictures and old memories and things like that. And so that was a weird thing that happened. And so I felt that a lot when I was dating my wife and starting to explain so much of my life to her, and wanting to, I took her home to Arizona, to where I'm from and where I grew up and all those things. And that I felt like it was like another thing I felt like I was robbed of, because it was no longer really my home anymore that I was showing her. It was just like this other part of my life, because my mom wasn't there anymore. And so it was like, you kind of just add it to the list of things that I felt like were cut short. And my wife and my mom not ever meeting and knowing each other was definitely at the top of that list. But underneath that was so many subsequent details and interactions that I had thought about a lot. Right. When I had been excited for, but I didn't really understand how badly I wanted that at the time. Yeah. Because I never thought there would be a scenario where that wouldn't happen. Right. Those interactions. And so yeah, that I think about it to this day. We don't have kids yet, but I think about that. Like they won't know. They won't know my mom. They won't know their grandma.
Right.
I believe that she'll know them. Yeah. But I don't. There's so many different ways to look at it, but it will never be that earthly interaction that you have always expected to have.
So. Yeah. Even like I myself have like. It sounds corny, but I've daydreamed and thought about, like, because my mom wants me to get married more than probably any human. Yeah. Yeah. And it breaks her heart when my heart gets broken. Yes. And when there's a girl that I'm interested in and it doesn't work out, it's hard on my mom. Totally. And I really for that reason, I've been very, very selective about like the girls that even meet my mom.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've fantasized about that moment when I like call my mom and I'm like,
Totally.
like this is
This
it.
is it, yeah.
Like I know I've cried wolf before.
Yeah, exactly.
But this
I
is,
promise. Yeah.
this one's it.
Yeah.
She really likes me back, Mom. This isn't a prank phone call.
Yeah.
But yeah, it breaks my heart to even think about any other alternative.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so thanks for talking about
Yeah.
that. I wanted to ask a little bit about I don't know that we talked about this last time, but your relationship with King Will Come. You know, I've had honestly the majority of the members of that band on the show, but I wanted to talk especially about this new song "Rest in Me."
Yeah.
Because I was going back through your catalog, listening to some of your songs, prepping for the episode, and I was like, hopefully this doesn't. He's not offended, but I think my all-time favorite piece by you is "Rest in Me."
Okay, yeah.
Like,
I love that.
Just because, you know, it's not your full song.
Right.
But
sure.
But yeah, I think it's your some of your best work. Tell
I
me a little
appreciate
bit about the writing process, your relationship with the band.
Yeah, that is a project that has evolved in so many different ways, and I'm really grateful to have been a part of it since day one. And since I remember we originally had a meeting about it as singer-songwriters in Utah that had a relationship with God, and that was kind of the only criteria at the time.
Yeah.
I still to this day I think is the only criteria.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be mentioned and focused on that
because it is interdenominational.
Totally.
Yeah.
And even the term relationship with God can be viewed as a lot of different things. I think even just I don't know, that can be such a rabbit hole to dissect of what that even means. But I remember we had a meeting, and there was kind of a core select few of us that just felt like something like this needed to be created for the culture here in Utah. But I think also selfishly, like, I think a lot of us songwriters that are in the group and were in the group at the time were kind of looking for an outlet to write these songs for and to like express these songs that maybe we feel like we didn't have without fully like labeling ourselves as like a Christian artist, which is like a concept and a label that I struggle with a lot.
Yeah.
And there's an artist named Chris Renzema who is really, really brilliant. He's based out of Nashville, and he would be seen by most in the industry as like a Christian artist. His songs are primarily about God and his relationship with God. And he always posts these like short little thoughts about that label and the box that can kind of put you in. And he said something along the lines of, and maybe it was a quote from somebody else, but he talked about the concept of music can't inherently be Christian. Christianity means that, is defined as a belief in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And I likewise think that an artist can be Christian, but music and as an art form and as a genre cannot solely be Christian.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to define in the sense of the content of the music that's being written. I just think that it's so important to feel like you can be honest with whatever level you're at with God in that relationship. And so all that to say, I think when the group first formed, and I'm really proud to consider myself kind of one of the founding members of that initial group. And like I said, it's taken so many different versions and evolutions, but it's always kind of been this collective. It was founded on the idea of kind of being a collective of other artists that were already doing things with music. And so my relationship more recently has looked a little bit differently, just in the sense that I've had a lot more focus on my own kind of more secular music. And so I haven't been as involved with some of the projects.
It's funny to even call your music secular music.
And that's I hate having to distinguish the two.
Right.
Like it shouldn't be.
Yeah, because what if you have a subtle verse that to you you're talking about God,
Totally.
but it's
Well, and there's a lot of music that says that,
yeah,
that does that,
mm-hmm.
but it's like it almost needs to be in a negative light for it to not be considered Christian, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it has to be, you have to be angry at God for the song to be socially acceptable.
Yeah.
You can write a love song about anybody else.
Sure.
You can write a love song about something that makes you happy. But if that thing is centered around God or a higher being that you believe in,
mm-hmm.
it kind of gets put into this box. And that is something that I've always struggled with, like the notion of labeling that and kind of putting in that box. Like I've never agreed with that, and it's always frustrated me. And so I think that this group especially has always wanted to lean on kind of breaking that mold a little bit and expressing things in song that maybe contemporary Christian music wouldn't allow.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there's a pressure within that industry of everything having to feel pretty perfect and
your image as well.
The image, but also just a confidence in a confidence in a God that you believe in, and like a confidence in your relationship with it. But I think there are a lot of people that believe in God where that confidence varies a little bit, and can kind of take its path of its own. So yeah, when that group kind of formed, of this group of so many artists that have been doing a lot of other things in the past, and it's evolved to take on so many new members, and so much of the New York crew that I know that you've had on on your show, that have added so much musically, but added so much spiritually, and with such a different background of Christianity and
forms of worship
that is so unheard of here in Utah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And how that relates with music. So yeah, I'll always consider myself definitely like a member of that group, and that can look like a lot of different things. And I get asked that a lot, because some of the events I'm not able to be a part of, or they just don't align up with certain things, and I don't ever want it to feel like it has to be this this group that you have to like commit to every aspect of it, in terms of I want them to be able to feel like they can feature different people, and it also is such a wide range of genre and like style of music that I think is I don't think it's realistic to expect everybody to feel like they have the same amount of contribution to it, like creatively. But in regards to Rest in Me, that song was written primarily by me, Ashley Hess, Jake Hansen, and Sam Alba. And there were a handful of other people in the room as well that kind of contributed. But it started at this kind of writing retreat that we had here in Utah, where we were just kind of breaking out into these groups, and would always start with a discussion. And I kind of feel guilty with that song, because when I had walked into that session, I was working on something else. I don't even remember. I'd walked into the room, and they were already like 2 hours into this session that was really just a conversation. Though like zero music had been written at the time. But I know that they were talking about that concept of how God desires us to rest in Him and to find that peace in Him. And I think we can so easily get distracted by that with our worldly pursuits and whatnot. And so, it kind of eventually, I don't remember when we started actually creating music in it, because it was still, like I said, just this kind of brainstorming conversation. And as a lot of that, it's, and you've been around the group a lot. You've been around different interactions. Like, so much of it is just expressing feelings, and sometimes feelings of doubt, but feelings of, I should just say, kind of sharing of testimony of what they're feeling and their own relationship with God. Like, it's amazing how much music is being created, because even more so, it's so much just sharing experiences and stories and whatnot.
Yeah, you're just kind of communing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. In like a very unstructured way. And so yeah, eventually we started kind of writing this song, and I had this chord progression that I was playing on the guitar. And I mean, this was 2 years ago? It was 2 years ago this fall that we wrote it.
Okay.
So the song had existed for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think Ashley started writing the verse, the melody and the words to that verse, and then I had kind of had this melody idea for the chorus and the lyrics for the chorus and whatnot, and then it kind of just started to take shape as other people pitched in more ideas and whatnot. But then yeah, it was kind of shelved for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was a song that I remember I was really excited to play or to have in a repertoire.
Mm-hmm.
I always get excited when a song like that is created that I feel like I can play in a million different rooms and scenarios. Like a song that I feel like I could play at a worship service, but also like at a regular music venue.
Right. It's just right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, like I think that those are special songs that are...
They're dynamic.
Yeah, they're dynamic, and I think that they can mean a million different things. And there's a lot of music like that exists that I don't think people see it as being that versatile. Like I think of Lauren Daigle's "You Say." That song like was everywhere on the radio for so long, and no one thought of it as like a Christian song necessarily. Right. It certainly wasn't being perceived like that or marketed that way because I think so many people just enjoyed the song and were able to interpret it how they wanted to. And I think that's how all music should be. Yeah. Like so that's another example of like how that distinguishing that genre and whatnot can frustrate me, because I do think there's a lot of music out there by bands and artists. I think Mumford & Sons is a big example of that. They talk so much about God that I don't think a lot of people really realize or understand, or I mean, it doesn't bother them.
Yeah.
And so why does it, you know what I'm saying? Because maybe because it's not marketed that way. And so I think anytime you can kind of create that, I call them sneaky Jesus songs. Yeah. That's how the term that I always use them of.
Sneezes,
exactly. And with that said, I think that music can exist also in a very like fearful way, and almost a doubting way of like a frustration with God, or a hesitation with any aspect of your relationship with him. And so I sometimes think that is a little bit more of my contribution to the group, is wanting to really kind of push that envelope of maybe even just in an effort to help other people feel heard in their journey with God. Yeah. I think a lot of people are, I think especially within the music world of contemporary Christian music, like I said before, I think it's just this kind of taboo thing to acknowledge anything but this perfect relationship with him that's hard to relate to for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so I think if I can express frustration with a little bit of hope still at the end of that tunnel, then it just feels authentic to me. And I would hope that other people would kind of feel the same way. But yeah, that's a special song that, like I said, I'm so grateful is finally out and released, and is a thing that other people can enjoy, because it's been ours for a long time before it was anybody else's. And which isn't, that's not uncommon for that to happen, and sometimes those songs are never heard. So I'm grateful that one was.
Yeah. One thing I love about the song, and I love this about a lot of quote unquote Christian songs, is sometimes I listen to it and I don't even think about God or think about the lyrics that way. I think about it as like a relationship, just a normal relationship, right? Yeah. Because that relationship, the songs are often about a relationship with God, but they're very analogous to a relationship with a loved one. Yeah. A mother, a father, your spouse.
Totally.
Like can I read a couple of these lyrics?
Please, yeah.
For you?
Yeah.
It says, I see you hiding, I hear you crying, I know you're trying. I see you're hurting, I hear your words, just give me your burdens. Like, to me, that's something a mother would say to her child.
Totally.
Right? That's something I would say to someone I love that is
Totally.
like feeling insecure.
Totally.
Me just saying, I see you hiding, but like, you don't need to.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then this is maybe my favorite line in the whole song when it says, I need you to be broken to be open. What does that line mean to you?
I think that just goes along the lines of, it's hard to appreciate how good things are until they're not good anymore.
Yeah.
Going back to like when my mom passed away, like I didn't really realize how important her role was in my life until she wasn't there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as humans, we just allow our ego to take over in so many scenarios where things are going our way, and it's very easy to not even really feel the need to attribute that success to anything other than it's just the way that it is in that moment.
Yeah.
And so I think when that can start to be fleeting a little bit, it's a humbling thing, obviously, to put things into perspective. And so I think with that lyric specifically in regards to a Heavenly Father, I think it can also kind of be like this explanation from him of why we suffer and why we're on this earth.
Yeah. Sort of the utility of suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. The way that is talked about with Adam and Eve and whatnot. And there's so many philosophical things to be taken from that as well, of knowing evil and good and knowing right and wrong.
Yeah.
How necessary that is for human life and human experience. And so, yeah, I think that I also think it's one of the most crucial things of a relationship with God too, is having that. I think it's important to maybe have at least one moment where you question the relationship to really understand where you stand with him and maybe how prominent it is in your life. So yeah, that's what I think of with that lyric, is that I think that brokenness humbles us in a way that allows us to be more accepting than we would, more so than we would in a state of pure joy and success. And you may not feel the same need for it.
Right.
So.
Okay, I have a hard question. Are you ready?
Please.
This is a question that is interesting because I want you to define for me what the word love means. But the tough part about this question is love is one of the most ubiquitous words in the English language. We use it casually. We use it very seriously. You know, you talk about a love for your wife, but you also say, I love pizza.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, but let's talk about more of a romantic love. For you personally, forget about what the dictionary says. When you think about the word love, when you're trying to encapsulate its meaning, what does it mean for you? And has that changed as you've found kind of your one true love?
Yeah. I think love is undeniably like the root of all the way that humans interact with each other, but more so like our own nature. I think it's at the root of why we do anything at all times.
Yeah.
I think ethics and morals and everything all sit on this foundation of love. I think we're naturally given this understanding of right and wrong, in the sense that I think the wrong is associated with hurting someone and doing the opposite of loving them. Whereas I think the right in those scenarios is making someone else feel loved. I think it's the reason that any of us are even able to interact with people. I think a lot of people, especially in today's age, can easily lose faith in humanity, and And that can be looked at in a million different ways of why people do the things that they do and why they feel hurt or whatever it may be. But I do think that we are just given an inherent nature to love in ways that I feel like we might not associate it as love.
Yeah.
Because like you said, there's so many, you can love food the same way that you love the person that you've married and whatnot. And those are two very different ends of that spectrum.
Right.
Because I think to me, it's just rooted in this realm of happiness and like
one is selfless.
Yes.
You know, I think there's a love that is really only self-serving.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe that's more connected to pleasure.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I don't know, just general frivolity. But yeah, when love crosses that line and becomes selfless, it transcends into something more powerful.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, the more selfless aspect of it just comes down to the joy that you feel from other people's love,
mm-hmm.
and an inherent desire to want to reciprocate that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. That's such a complex thing to think about, because like you said, we express love for things in so many different ways, and it is such a wide variety of ways to express it, and levels, like degrees of love is such a different thing for so many different people. But yeah, for me, selfless love is rooted in feeling the need to make that person feel loved,
mm-hmm.
and maybe help them see themselves as the way that I do, or you could think as God does, or as helping them understand their importance and their worth, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's something that I feel like I could stir over for a long time and come up with a better answer. But
no, that's a great answer. I love the thought that, I don't know, that there's just sort of pre-existent love within us. And within maybe all realms of reality. You know, like, and it's up to us to capture it and to utilize it and to express it. But I think it is just there.
Totally.
There for the taking.
Yeah.
Like, I think we're born with love in us.
I agree.
And obviously, like, it helps to be born into a loving family with loving parents and, you know, the culture you're surrounded by. But I do think we're inherently gifted with love. Already. Yeah. But yeah, it's tragic when people feel like they can't love, or they don't have anyone to love them. Yeah. But I don't think it's impossible for anyone. Like, I think anyone can feel it. It might be really hard. Yeah. And you might have to, you know, go through some healing, and you might have to do a lot of work to get there. But I do think there's love existent for everyone.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times it just comes down to their version of self-worth. Yeah. That allows them to feel that love. Mm-hmm. I think the love that you feel entirely depends on how much you love yourself.
Yeah, which is...
Otherwise, it doesn't feel genuine. Yeah. It doesn't feel like it's...
Or you don't buy it.
You don't buy it. Yeah, exactly. Because it just feels like a mask, or this facade, like kind of just this fake representation of how someone sees you. But I think you have to have a little bit of sense of self-worth in order to feel love that others have for you.
Yeah, I think even if you're in a really bad spot, you might even think someone that loves you is an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you might be
you might think less of them because
you might be like, dude, like, if you love me, you don't understand
bad
anything.
Taste,
Yeah. I want to read this quote to you, get your thoughts on it.
Please.
So this isn't a book. I could talk about this book all day, but this book, this guy basically makes up words for emotions that don't have words.
Mm.
And so he just talks about, all
Like
these.
he assigns that emotion with a word. Yeah. Okay.
But they're very specific
Yeah.
feelings.
I love that.
And I love what he says here. He says, if you are lucky enough to feel sad, well, savor it while it lasts, if only because it means that you care about something in this world enough to let it under your skin.
Mm.
Yeah. So what do you think when you hear that? I'll read it one more time. If you're lucky enough to feel sad, well, savor it while it lasts, if only because it means that you care about something in this world enough to let it under your skin.
Yeah, I think sadness just represents a sense of humanity that you long for something else.
Mm-hmm.
I think it means that and there can be something beautiful in that, to know that there is something else here that's worth having for you,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to just this bleak existence of unfulfilling life. I think in order, as we've talked about a lot here, just that difference between good and bad, and understanding those two things in comparison. I don't think you can. Yeah, I think a lot of people would feel relieved if they could understand that aspect of it, to know that you're obviously longing for something that you don't have.
Yeah.
But that acknowledges an existence of that thing, whatever it may be.
Right. And that's great.
It is great. It's like it's a hope that things can get better and that they will get better.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you just don't have anything to compare it with, and otherwise, it's just an acceptance of bleakness, I guess.
Right. Did you have a hard time? I'm sure it's easier to talk about this stuff now. Like, how long's it been since your mom passed?
6 years.
6 years. Yeah. Like, did you have any moments in those early days where you could feel any like redemptiveness to your sadness?
Yeah.
Or was it all bleakness? Or were you like, you know what, this is, of course I'm sad and it hurts and I wish it would go away.
Yeah.
And I wish it could be anything else, but I can see the beauty in it.
Sure. Yeah, I think just acknowledging, I think for me, a lot of that was acknowledging my relationship with my dad,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe more so defining how I was going to treat that relationship from then on.
Yeah.
Knowing that my time with him was going to be limited, and now having this kind of new perspective of making sure that I was soaking in every moment with him. But I remember when my mom passed away, I had a friend that reached out that had lost his father a few years prior, and he had shared that the biggest thing that he had learned from losing his dad, as well as the biggest blessing, was his ability to mourn with others that were going through a similar thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what he meant by that until I had other loved ones that were losing loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that same thing. I felt like I could provide a perspective that the rest of the world, that the majority of the world was not able to provide, in this level of comfort of a similar situation and a similar trial that I had overcome or was continuing to overcome. That for me has felt very fulfilling as someone that went through that, to feel like I am able to at least use that experience to kind of offer a little bit of wisdom or advice to someone else that's going through something similar, so that no one feels alone as they go through it. I was grateful to not feel alone as I went through it, because of people in that same situation.
Right.
And so I would say that was a redemptive quality or at least a redemptive experience of one, just having a different purpose in life and understanding what I wanted out of life and how to not put things off, to appreciate what I have, but then to also strive to kind of really go for what I wanted.
Yeah.
Me pursuing music was a big part of that.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I was not really pursuing music. I was playing a lot of music and gigging a good amount, but it was never. I was afraid to commit to it, and I was afraid to acknowledge that it was really the only thing I've ever wanted to do
Yeah.
in this life. And so losing my mom kind of kicked that into gear of, one, understanding just how fragile life is,
Mm-hmm.
and two, maybe understanding what she would want from me and how she would want me to live my life and
Yeah.
go after the things that I dream of.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was, I guess, the more redeeming thing for me, of being able to kind of kick that into action a little bit. But it's affected it's affected just about every scenario I have with anybody,
Right.
and how I appreciate loved ones around me, and making
Yeah.
sure that I'm expressing my appreciation for them, and making sure that I'm not leaving anything unsaid. Yeah, with every interaction.
Right.
Because I didn't get any kind of warning when my mom died. Like, I didn't have, it was an unexpected, all of a sudden she was gone.
Yeah.
And so that has made me, I don't think I was the best at expressing that before. So I think I allowed a lot of things to just be assumed, like my
Right.
feelings towards people.
Yeah.
I think I allowed them to just be assumed as what they were, and just believed that my actions around them were enough to confirm my appreciation of them.
Yeah.
I think that's entirely, like, been flipped ever since she died, of just trying to be more mindful of how I'm expressing that to people.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Okay, this might be potentially cheesy.
That's okay.
But
we love cheesy.
We're here for the cheese.
Yeah.
I'm sure this happens to you a lot with people that you don't know super well, or you're reconnecting with, that ask you, like, "Oh, tell me a little bit about your wife." What's something that you feel like you wish, like, in a quick interaction, you're like, "Dude, I can't quite tell you how amazing she is."
Yeah.
But what's something that maybe most people don't know about your wife, and maybe you've learned in this last year, that it just makes her so her?
I think it's the way that she goes out of her way to make other people feel loved, or feel like they are seen.
Yeah.
There were so many tiny little interactions on our, like, very first dates, that I was very aware of that, of how she would interact with people.
Yeah.
Like clerks at a gas station and things like that, or going out of her way to very mindfully come up with a compliment that they could give that person for no reason at all.
Yeah.
It genuinely was one of the main reasons I fell in love with her, because I think it was something that could be seen as very cheesy for a lot of people, or something that I think people would feel unnecessary, but I don't think anybody could put a price or a value on what it might have meant for any of those people in any scenario or situation. Like, you just never know. And so why not? Like, why not go out of your way to do that if the upside could be so massive?
Right.
So I think just little interactions that I wouldn't have ever thought about.
Yeah.
I think she was leaving more of an impact than I certainly had ever tried to do with people that you knew you would never see again.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's something that anybody can see with her if they spend a little bit of time with her, especially in public. But it was one of the very first things that I noticed that was different about her, and someone that I just immediately knew that I wanted to align myself with and spend as much time as I could,
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your, like, how important friendships are to you.
Yeah.
Do you I don't know, do you hold friendship as a very valuable thing? Is it something that you're like, I don't know what I would do without it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you bring that up in regards to marriage as well, because a very natural thing that happens when you get married, or you kind of find your person and you start spending the majority of time with them, is you start to notice that you're not spending as much time with other people that you previously were.
Yeah.
That you still feel the same way about and that are still important to you, but they naturally just maybe don't take the same priority. And that's not a conscious decision usually.
Yeah.
But it's just the environment of getting to know this person and really committing yourself to them and starting your life, like this life of your own with them. That has led me to really think a lot about like what friendships mean to me, because
it's just not as easy.
It's not as easy, but it's also not. Their importance isn't expressed the same way that it was before, because I'm maybe not spending the same amount of time with them as I was previously. That has led to me making more conscious effort to make that known in other ways, and reaching out or whatever, and smaller acts of acknowledging them and whatnot. And so, as opposed to just being single and your guy friends and whatnot that you just naturally spend so much time with, and you maybe don't feel the same need to acknowledge it the same way. Because friendship in those relationships to me is everything, and a relationship with my wife is rooted in that exact same thing. Like it always has been, and my wife is my best friend for sure, and I wouldn't have been able to I wouldn't have married her if that wasn't the case.
And those are the like, from an outsider perspective, those are the best relationships.
Totally.
When they're actually best friends. Like you hear everyone say like, yeah, she's my best friend.
Yeah.
But like, then you sometimes see it and you're like, oh, those guys are actually best friends.
Yeah.
Like they laugh about everything. They talk about everything.
Yeah.
They just want to hang out, you know? But like, you see plenty of couples where you're like, maybe they were at some point, but they are not best friends.
Yeah, they're not done. Yeah, right. Yeah, I think, it's a funny thing, like I said, that I feel like I've had to learn how to balance of still feeling like I'm expressing or maybe nourishing other relationships that just aren't, they're not as big of a priority in my life at the time, just because of the nature of being married and newly married and whatnot. But I think that's also just part of getting older and being busy and having other ventures that you're pursuing and things like that. And I think that leads it to be more important than ever to just express the value of that relationship to those people. 'Cause I do. It is. It makes it sound like I like have all these friends that I don't have time for, and like it's like woe is me because I can't. Have too many friends.
Poor Jordan.
No, and it's not. Friends. It's more of just like you express that differently when I have had to express that a little bit differently as I've naturally just wanted to spend more time with my wife.
Right.
Like it's
and like your music career and meeting your wife have sort of coincided. Like you know, you've started to grow as an artist, and you started touring a little bit and getting a bigger fan base as you met your wife. And so those things combined gives you way less time.
Totally. And that's another aspect too, is like learning how to be a musician at the same time, learning how to when I first met my wife and was especially in that stage of like spending every waking second with her and not wanting to do anything else, there was definitely a point eventually where I was like, oh, I haven't really written a song in like 5 months.
Right.
Like I haven't really sat down to write like I used to, because
I'm just happy it turns out.
Yeah, and I was writing, I wrote a couple songs for her and about her and whatnot, but I wasn't spending nearly the same amount of time with my music, and that has led me to have to be a little bit more diligent with, or I guess just like intentional with how I spend that time and divide my time in making sure that she, trying to include her in that in any way that I can as well. Because before I had her, it was just like, it wasn't even that it was a bigger priority, but it was just like, it was just what I did. Like
it was your default.
During every waking moment of free time. But then you have that person that you want to have all that time with it. You don't feel like you have the same amount of free time because like you don't feel like you're busy with that person, but you just don't have that same downtime that you do late at night when you're, used to going and playing your guitar at 2 a.m. or whatever and feeling, retrospective about a million different things in life. And so I think, that has been a more of a mindful change of how I'm dividing that time. Similarly, between music and friends and other relationships and whatnot, and just understanding how to divide my attention, I guess.
Yeah. I remember the last girl I like seriously dated, I remember after like a month or so realizing, oh, I haven't been to the gym in a month.
Yeah.
And luckily your boy's got a good metabolism. But
you didn't get too far off track.
No, I looked the same. But I was in a good gym routine and was going 4 or 5 days a week.
You just don't think about it.
And then I was just like, it was a fever dream. I was like, I'm not sure that I did anything else.
Right. Yeah.
But that's a sign that you're actually crazy about somebody.
For sure.
All the periphery just starts to blur.
Totally.
Tell me about like meeting JP Saxe.
Yeah.
That's such a cool experience.
I'm trying to remember where that all kind of first started, because for one, I'm so grateful for social media and how accessible like crazy relationships like that can be, because you just have access to people that you would never have access to. And
one like even semi-viral video can
change everything and put you in front of everybody in the world that you've ever wanted to hear your music. That you wouldn't normally never have a way to get it in front of them. So with him, I think I had just covered a couple of random songs over the years that he had noticed, and I had played a festival called Super Bloom here in Utah that he headlined. I guess this was last year. Yeah, last year. And I met him backstage, and we had got talking, and he had mentioned that he had remembered a couple of videos, or one of the more recent videos or something that he had seen, that he knew who I was from social media and had seen a video of something that I had covered of his. Which, like I said, is kind of a crazy thing that you would that you normally wouldn't have that interaction with. So we talked a bit backstage, and then he did this like kind of campaign thing for his most recent tour of he was gonna allow a few local openers at certain shows. And so he kind of was going through this like selection process of, and I had like submitted another video of, I don't even remember what song I had covered, and anyway, he had seen that and messaged me, and originally the plan was for me to open his show in Salt Lake, which I was super grateful for. But then there was a conflict with the venue not allowing, like there was like a curfew thing at the end, like they weren't able to extend the duration of the show to add another opener. So he'd reached out and was super kind and entirely unnecessary. Was just like, hey, I'd love to get you to the show though, and I would love to have you sing a song with me during his VIP set. So they usually, and most of these tours has like a VIP. They'll do a little VIP meet and greet set where they'll let people, you can buy a specific ticket that gets you in before doors open.
Oh, okay.
And the artist will come out and do like a 20-minute kind of Q&A and then play some songs intimate that usually won't be on the rest of the set that night. So he had me come and we sang a song together there, and then invited me back onto his tour bus, and we recorded. We had his videographer go on there and like record this little clip and that's what I had posted. And so and then we just talked for a long time, and it was super, again, one of those things that like was not necessary at all. Like it wasn't this, he didn't need to. And he was just super gracious and expressed a genuine, like, enjoyment of like what I was doing as a musician and whatnot, and my music as well, which is super, super kind. And it was crazy to talk with him. And my wife actually came on, like was on the tour bus as well. Like we were hanging out, and this was like, he was about to go on stage in like 10 minutes, but we were talking, he was kind of going through this warm up and whatnot. And we got talking about a bunch of different things. At this time, he had just gone on, he was on his own tour at the time, but he had previously been on tour with John Mayer as the opener for that tour. of like an arena tour and playing
Yeah.
these giant arenas. And so we talked about that for a long time, and it was really cool to hear his perspective of how I think a lot of doubts that any artist can have about whether they are successful or not.
Mm-hmm.
From everything that I've learned and conversed with musicians that are much more successful than I am, it feels like that goalpost is just constantly moving as you go up the ranks, which is a mind-boggling thing to think about for someone at his level or John Mayer's level. We talked a lot about, I had asked him if John Mayer ever felt like, so John Mayer is he's been touring arenas for years, like forever.
Yeah.
Played arenas for a long, long time. But I've always had this thought of like, does that desire to take the next step ever go away?
Right.
In the sense of, does he wish he was playing stadiums?
Yeah.
Does he wish he was selling Taylor Swift level tickets?
Right.
Which is an insane thing to someone like me who's playing theaters and clubs and whatnot, to think that you could get to the stage where you're touring arenas and be like...
be unsatisfied.
Yeah, and be unsatisfied.
Yeah.
We had talked about that and with him and the videographer and whatnot, interactions that they had with John Mayer, to be like, yeah, it wasn't uncommon for him to every night look at how ticket sales were doing and things like that to think about. And it was a humbling thing to think about. It was comforting to know, and also a little bit disheartening to be like,
like, oh,
this never goes away. Apparently,
am I just chasing a brass ring forever?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it kind of is up to how you perceive that and how you choose to accept that is just always, that's just the natural progression of chasing your dream. And
and it's a weird thing because you want to improve your craft and increase your fan base. Mm-hmm. But at what point does it become unhealthy, or at what point does it become like a lack of gratitude?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so I do think that it is important to define what success will look like for you, to feel like you have some sort of benchmark that once you surpass, you can take it down a notch a little bit and not feel the same level of longing for maybe what another artist has. Right.
And you can, I think you can work just as hard.
Totally.
But maybe a part of you can rest emotionally.
Yeah. But from everything I have heard from so many different artists, it sounds like it's just a natural part of progression, and you could relate to any industry of pursuing something yourself and wanting to be better than you were the day before. And so at some point I do think it's important to understand what you have and understand, like, and that was the heart of a lot of that conversation with JP Saxe, of just being like, he was expressing in a very vulnerable way of like, this tour has been amazing, but like, we still could have sold more tickets in certain shows. Yeah. Like, we didn't, there were shows that didn't sell out. Yeah. But if you had told, he just kept saying, like, if you had told me 5 years ago or 6 years ago that this is what we'd be doing, I'd say you're insane. And so I think the more that you can think back to that past self, the healthier that relationship with success can be. Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, imagine your first song you like put out on Spotify was like 2019, right? Yeah. Or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Imagine in 2019 thinking that you'd be like on the same stage with the National Parks or JP Saxe, or totally. You've worked with like Philip Phillips. Yeah. Right. Like all these people you look up to and stuff. Like you probably would have been like. And totally overjoyed. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, he was super great and super kind, and just, gave me a lot of great advice, and was super sweet in a way, like I said, was not necessary. Like, it wasn't anything that his management was like, it wasn't this like charity act of like, go be nice to Jordan. No, I think there was a point where the tour manager was actually a little bit annoyed of the hoops that the tour manager was going through to like organize with me of when I was going to go backstage and go and give me this credential and whatnot, things like that. So it was very kind and unnecessary. And I've been a huge fan of his for so long and looked up to him for a long time. So it was funny. We were, my wife and I drove that day. We were playing the night before in Jackson Hole with the National Parks. We were on the road with them. And so I drove back the next morning back here to Salt Lake to do that show with him and to be there for that with him. So, Yeah, it was super cool. I was super grateful. He was the kindest. So,
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, we'll wrap this up soon. I
Cool.
wanted to ask, if you had any random questions or curiosities for me.
It's been so cool to watch this podcast and show evolved, and I would love to know, like, maybe where your level of that, like, definitive level of success would feel like for you in something like this and pursuing this. Like,
That's such a tough question.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, the goalpost just moves
Just
and
always
moves,
moves.
right? Because I remember thinking, because I've been on this grind for years, and, before my podcast, I was writing books and trying to make it as an author, and I'm still doing that. But I remember thinking, like, I don't know, 5 years ago or something, just being like, man, imagine like just what it would look like if I had 10,000 followers on Instagram. Just the aesthetic of 10K and how that would make me look.
Totally.
And the cachet behind it.
Yeah.
And then I reached it, and it was really cool.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, like, now I want to get 20,000
Totally.
or whatever.
Totally.
And then, you start to think, well, how important is a very specific number of followers?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It starts to become kind of this silly thing you're chasing. But for me, I'm sure you feel similar with music because people are so affected by music. But for me, what's made me feel like so validated in my dream is the messages I get from people.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, that's been like, hey, you made it, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
The ultimate next step for me is just, a little more financial stability.
Sure.
To be able to do this just on a higher level.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like, I'm so happy and grateful to be doing what I'm doing that if I can just continue to do it,
totally,
that would bring me so much joy. And I'm going to do it regardless.
Exactly.
So it would sure be easier if I could
just commit everything to it.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm getting there and I'm close.
Yeah.
And so, it's been really exciting just feeling like the growth I've felt has just felt like validation. Like, hey, like people actually do want to hear what you have to say.
Yes.
Or they're interested in your guests and your interviews and the way you articulate yourself. Like, because when your audience is small, even if your art is great, it's so easy to feel like, well, is it?
Totally.
Because nobody is listening.
Yeah, the numbers mean more. It can be easy for those numbers to mean more than the individual interactions.
Yeah, because you work so hard at whether it's a song or an episode.
Yeah.
And then you go look at the analytics and you're like, dude, no one cares.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, getting over that that little hurdle of like, now I have enough listeners that nothing really bombs, like crashes and burns.
There's enough of a foundation to
like
sustain.
I put out something, people are going to listen to it, and I'm sure you starting to feel similar with your stuff. Tell me a little bit about your stick-to-itiveness with trying to grow your personal brand as a solo artist and the social media grind. Has that been really taxing on you, or has it just been you're like, well, I love this, I'm gonna keep doing it?
I think the most taxing thing has just been how much of that grind includes things that aren't making music. Like the majority of my day, like work day as an independent artist, is so much of it is creating content that isn't music. Like much of it is filming TikTok clips and reels and things like that there's music involved with it, but the actual small portion that is like me in my studio recording or writing or whatever is not nearly as much as I want it to be. But a lot of that is just kind of part of the game, and I've accepted that as much as I wish it was different. Yeah, it's funny to go along kind of with what we were saying of those goalposts moving. Like it's so easy to make that goal for yourself, like you said, of 10,000 followers, and then to get there and be like, man, how am I going to get to 1,000 or 100,000 followers? And I remember like when I first went on the road touring and with the national parks, it was like, oh, this is so rad that I'm playing this show for hundreds of people that don't know who I am and play for this new audience. And I'd finish my set and I'd be on this high, and then I'd watch them play their headliner set and be like, how am I supposed to ever get, 900 people to come see me in this city the way that they have tonight? Do you know what I'm saying? Like it feels like I'm seeing what they're doing, and then it can so quickly become so humbling to be like, well, this is clearly the next step,
but I'm so far,
and I feel so far from this. Like it feels I've just accomplished this thing that I've dreamed of for so long, of touring as a professional musician and singer-songwriter. And now I'm seeing this next part, and it feels impossible. The same way that touring felt impossible in any capacity, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I think all I can do is that daily grind that you talked about of just making sure that I'm doing everything that I can every day and making content and the best content, and, playing the game as much as that you don't really want to play as a musician, to just finding that kind of clickbait secret of what gets people invested in like a short form piece of content that didn't really exist in like the music industry 10 years ago. There was no such thing as this short form content. It was kind of this, there were one-hit wonders, but that's turned into I've said it recently in another interview of like this one clip wonder, of this like one viral moment that has suddenly been sized down from what was a radio hit to what's now just a 30-second TikTok clip that blew up for a day. That can be really disheartening to think about. But like I said, I think it just comes down to making sure that I'm doing as much as I can to increase my reach. It's this balance of like trying to also like tethering the line of making good content and marketing myself as a viable business, and then going into the songwriting side of like feeling like I'm being creative and creatively honest, while also making decisions as a songwriter that is going to add to this business model and find success. So it's kind of this like this tightrope that you're walking of like making sure that both of those things are being fulfilled while still feeling creatively honest and authentic. So it is, as much as I think as much as any musician would love to change different aspects of how music is consumed and discovered and whatnot, it beats anything else I've done. It beats the years of denial of not pursuing the dream. You know what I'm saying? So that's all I can do. It's just kind of that day-to-day grind.
I as your friend and a lover of music, I just love when I see Jordan just pumping out content. I'm like, good.
Thank you, brother.
Because there are, and I'm sure there are a lot of artists that get so frustrated with it, and they're like, there's almost an ego involved where they're 100%. Like, I want fans to love me, not for my gimmicky videos or whatever. Yeah. But it's like, okay.
It's hard.
You can hate the way things are, or you can kind of embrace them and just lean in and
accept the world of entertainment the way it is.
Because it's also a gift in a lot of ways, because you're way more discoverable than
100%
before.
Oh, without a doubt. It is. There's definitely two sides of it that I don't think. We're in a world where independent artists like myself can thrive in a way that they couldn't 6 or 7 years ago, and especially 10 or 15 years ago. It was impossible without a major label, and so that accessibility.
It should be emboldening for people.
Yeah, it should. Yeah. And I think as long as you can focus on that and put your ego aside and just try to take advantage of that opportunity to get yourself seen in a way that we didn't have access to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So Yeah, there's always a pessimistic way to look at it, and
Right.
and like an ignorant artistic way to look at it, and to not feel like to feel like you're selling out or not being true to your creative self. But
Yeah.
ultimately, it's like if I can play music for a living and write songs for people and play those songs for people, I think that's all that matters. Like
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing, and sometimes you just kind of have to go with the punches and go with the trends of, the audience and the consumer is always smarter than you. Like
Right.
they are always in control.
Right.
Entirely.
Yeah.
And you will never be able to control that influence that they have on your success. Like it is entirely dependent on their interaction with you.
Right.
And so I think in that regard, I think it's just part of how it is and what you have to do. And like I said, there are worse ways to make a living.
Right.
So,
well, speaking of which, you're gonna play a little song for us.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the song?
Yeah, it comes out this week. It comes out on Friday. I'm sure by the time that this comes out, it will be released. It's called Still Feel Alone. It is a song that I wrote quite a few years ago. And it's funny because it's a song I wrote well before meeting my wife.
Yeah.
And it is very much about frustrations with being vulnerable and loving someone. And it's kind of about loving someone that you feel like will never be able to love you back. More so of just like, you could do everything you could and they could give everything that they could, but it still won't be enough.
Yeah.
Like
just doesn't work.
There will always be a wall between that. And it's a song that I've kind of been sitting on for a long time. And it's funny that I feel like I've had a lot of people that have seen me promote it and whatnot that have been like, who's this song about? Like, this isn't about your new wife that you just married. It's like, no, I'm very happily married. That is a funny, that's another adjustment of like being a songwriter of having all these songs about previous either failed relationships or frustrations with dating and whatnot. Those songs have still followed me with my career.
Yeah.
Even though I'm married now, I still play those. Like when I play a show, like I'm still essentially reciting these journal entries.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a lot of industries where you would do that in that same way of like recite this thing that you have fully moved on from or recovered from, but you're still taking with you a little bit. And so, it's an older song that I still hope that I think other people can relate to. And I thought it was still worth releasing and pursuing.
Why now?
That's a good question. I think it's just a song that I remember being really proud of it when I wrote it. And I think it was just time for, I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that. Like, why do I release any of the stuff that I have? I think at some point I just felt inspired
to add music or whatever.
Yeah, I think more so it was more of like this is a song that I had written for so long that I had in my pocket that I hadn't gone into a studio and worked it out and produced it.
Gotcha, yeah.
I think that was more the thing of like, oh, I kind of want to try to tackle this song in the studio. Yeah. So then once I had done that, it was like, well, why wouldn't I release it? You know, it's like, because I am in this stage in my career where I do think that I think it's beneficial to just release as much music as you can. And I think it can be, I think it can hurt your career a little bit to be too selective of what you choose to release and what not to release, and to allow these big gaps of content and whatnot. Right. And more so, and not even in an effort to try to find more success. It's more of just to try to just overcome that ego thing and perfection and striving for that perfection. Like I kind of just want to be better at just allowing these songs to be what they are, because they already exist to me. Right, so it's like, why not give it a chance to let other people have a relationship with it and see what it can do while we're at it. So
no, that's exciting. Well, sweet. Well, bro, thanks so much
for
coming.
Man. I appreciate you, brother. Yeah, I love what you're doing, and you're a good man, and I appreciate the conversations that you have and the platform that you give people. I think I think it's beneficial to a lot of viewers, and obviously, as you've seen in the growth and numbers, and yeah, you're good at what you do. You gotta,
Thanks, bro.
Gotta keep doing it.
Thanks,
so,
man. Appreciate
yeah.
it. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
I was down, I was drowning. I followed the warmth of the sun. I couldn't tell if you'd saved me. I couldn't tell if I'd won. So why'd you call, why'd I answer? And why would I disagree? I always knew if you chose me, that you'd still probably leave. And if we built a home, I would find you an architect. Plan the day, walk the town, and I would still feel alone. I would still feel alone. Wish I knew when I met you, you'd never be who I need. 'Cause even if I could change you, I needed you to need me. I'm sure I'll ask if you like this one. I wrote it all about you. You always cared for my feelings. You always told me the truth. And if we built a home, I would find you an architect. Plan the day, walk the town, and I would still feel alone. And if we tied the knot, you would probably loosen it. Every boy gets a shot, but I would still feel alone. I would still feel alone. And I've waited, and I'm sure I know that I would let you let me down, but I hate it, I feel small. I know that I would let you let me down. Oh, 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 And if we built a home, and if we tied the knot, and if I got my chance, I would still feel alone. I would still feel alone. I would still feel alone.